The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised.
Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
Where strange lights speed beyond reason across a clear night sky.
The house at the end of the road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange noises make the living shiver.
Lurking shadows hiding on the edge of the woods just outside your back door.
Odd, true events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole. I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. I'm Wes, and that's my wife and co-host, Beth.
Hello, everyone.
So, Beth, we had a pretty busy week. We released our first premium bonus content episode for subscribers.
Yes, we did. So, for those of you who may have missed our announcement last week, we've started a subscription model for those of you who might be looking for more episodes of our show.
Yeah, so we've mentioned before that for the time being, we don't plan on running any ads during our weekly episodes because we feel like it interrupts the flow and may be annoying to all of you to have your episode interrupted. But the show does incur monthly expenses for us, and our equipment does need replacing from time to time. So as a way to help pay for some of those costs, we thought we'd offer some bonus episodes for a small fee. And that way, you don't all have to listen to ads during our regular shows.
And the bonus episodes are also ad-free, and they're a little more relaxed than our normal episodes because we like the idea of covering topics that might not exactly be supernatural or in the vein of what we normally do, because there are a lot of topics out there that we think are pretty cool, but they don't exactly fit our content, so we've passed on them. But with the bonus episodes, we can kind of delve into the supernatural adjacent. So they're in the realm of the odd or the interesting or the just plain weird, but they're not all going to be about hauntings and things like that.
Right, like Beth said, they may be about little-known historical figures who did something really cool, or they might be about places that are really odd, but in a different way than you'd expect. And like Beth said, the conversations between us may be more relaxed in the sense that we may divert into things that we wouldn't say in a regular episode, and they won't be as scripted, and definitely they'll be a lot more laid back and fun.
So, as always, you can listen to our free episodes every week. We're going to continue those. But if you are interested, you can also subscribe to our monthly bonus episodes. And in a sense, your subscription fee really means you're helping to produce the show, which is kind of cool.
Yes, and we'd also like to give a shout out to those of you who have already signed up. We appreciate you.
We do. And speaking of appreciating, because I appreciate you, where did your mind wander this week?
You're always sucking up to me. What's up with that?
Well, segues aren't my thing, and that's just how I got you where you need to be.
Well then. So most people have heard of ghost dogs or even ghost cats. We're convinced we even had one ourselves. But what about a ghost moose?
A ghost moose?
A specter moose, if you will. Now, as funny as that sounds, there's quite a tale about just such a moose in Maine.
Well, where else would a ghost moose live?
To be fair, the specter moose didn't start off as a ghost. If anything, it was more of a mythical beast that quite a few people saw. But its size and white glowing hide made most people laugh when witnesses talked about it. But let's start at the beginning. In Maine, back in 1891, Clarence Duffy of Old Town was doing his job as a hunting guide near Lobster Lake when he saw something extraordinary, a massive white moose. Clarence did not get close enough to the animal to take a shot, but he could see him clear enough to get a good look at the moose. Horrified by the encounter, Clarence shared what he saw with the other locals, but they laughed at him. A few months later, John Ross, a lumberman from Bangor, also saw the huge, majestic beast at Lobster Lake. With this second sighting, some people began to believe. The massive white moose was described as 10 to 15 feet tall, with antlers spanning 10 to 12 feet across. They estimated the beast weighed upwards of 2,500 pounds. Now, just to give all of you a little comparison, an average moose at that time only stood about 6 feet tall and weighed between 800 and 900 pounds, with an antler span of just 4 to 6 feet. So this thing was huge.
It was really huge.
Yeah, he had a good set of antlers on him.
He sounds like it, yes.
But he got all the female moose. A New York City sports hunter named Howard Van Ness was hunting 30 miles northeast of Norcross with 3 friends in 1892 when they sighted the Specter Moose. Howard had become separated from his friends, and he alone took several shots at the strange beast, putting several bullets into the animal. His shots, including one to the shoulder, did nothing but enrage the animal, which snorted, then charged him. Some accounts say Van Ness ran for his life and sheltered inside a cave, while others say he ran for his life and dove under a thicket of deadfall. In this version, the Specter Moose continued to circle his hiding spot, even jumping clear over it, trying to root Van Ness out. The man was able to get a pretty good look at the creature, and he described it as weighing a ton and being as tall as a camel.
Wow.
Local newspapers began printing stories about the encounters. Over the next several years, there were many, many accounts of people encountering the Specter Moose. Finally, in 1899, the New York Times ran an article outlining all the various accounts. Other papers like the Boston Globe picked up on the story, and people came in droves to hunt the beast themselves. Maine author Al Mashad wrote a comprehensive book about the encounters in 2019, saying his great-great-grandfather was one of the men who went in search of the beast. He says his great-great-grandfather had run-ins with the Specter Moose 3 times and was able to take 2 shots at it. But, like most people, he missed. Mashad said something pretty cool, that the Specter Moose had 10 pounds of lead in it because nobody could kill it. In 1899, the same year as that New York Times article, a Massachusetts man named Gilman Brown reported that he got close enough to the creature to count 22 points on just one side of its antlers, an astronomical amount since most moose rarely have more than 12. He said he took 5 shots at the animal, which merely glowered at him and walked away.
All of these hunters could not have been bad shots, right? Like statistically. So you have to think that most, if not all of their shots did actually hit this moose.
And the moose got around. It wasn't just Lobster Lake. People sighted it near the Roach River and near Chairback Mountain, an area spanning about 47 miles, if my map questing skills are accurate. But this is one of my favorite encounter stories. In 1906, another Maine man, George Nealon, was riding his bicycle on the road between Sherman and Macawahawk. When he first spotted the moose, he thought it was a white horse. He stopped and tried to get a better look, but the Specter Moose caught sight of him and charged him. Nealon dropped his bike and climbed a tree to escape.
I can just picture this poor guy just tooling down the road on his bike and then scrambling up a tree because I don't think you could out-pedal a charging moose.
I don't think so either.
But what else do you do? I mean, it's not like you can outrun it.
You just run like hell and look for something to get up on. The moose investigated his bike and then sauntered off into the woods, or vanished, as Nealon put it. Vanishing was something several of the witnesses said the moose could do. In fact, Part of the reason so many people initially laughed at the tales that were told was because they often ended with the white, almost glowing moose walking through solid objects and simply vanishing. Newspaper accounts even included that a ball of light seemed to form and emanate from between the beast's antlers.
That's strange.
So what were people really seeing? A massive, oversized albino moose, perhaps? Maybe, except animals with albinism generally have pink eyes, and those who were close enough to the Specter Moose insisted its eyes were brown. More recently, scientists have put forth the idea that the unusually large moose was suffering from a tick infestation, which does lighten the fur of a moose significantly. But it also causes the moose to become gaunt and lose great patches of fur, which by all accounts was not the case with the muscular, massive appearance of the Specter Moose. Sightings did die down for a while, but ratcheted back up in the 1930s, earning yet another article in the New York Times. By 1938, the ghost moose was mostly seen along the west branch of the Penobscot River, almost 60 miles from its original home near Lobster Lake. Perhaps the Specter Moose had gotten a little lonely, because in the 1938 sighting, he was seen among a herd of regular-sized moose. They were about 16 grazing females, and the ghost moose was one of the 3 males guarding them. The witness, known only as Houston, claimed that one of the males, which was white and luminous in color, made all the other moose, including the males, look like pygmies. He glanced away for only a second, and then when he looked back, the massive white moose had just vanished. And then there's this story, which truly does solidify the Specter Moose's inclusion in the ghost or cryptid category, at least to me. There were a group of hunters in east-central Maine near the Molonkus stream who were able to kill a very large white moose. After taking it down, they slit its throat and hung it from a tree for the blood to drain, planning to skin it the next day. When they awoke in the morning, it was gone. Perhaps they assumed someone or someone's had come into their camp and somehow taken it. That night, the hunters were astonished, and I would assume extremely freaked out, when the same white moose, its throat still cut, walked into their camp.
That's creepy.
The men grabbed their guns and shot at it yet again, but the Specter Moose seemed to feel nothing. It simply walked away. Later, 90 miles away in Ashland, the throat-slit white Specter Moose was seen again walking away from the bullets hunters pumped into it.
That's really creepy.
So, is it all legend? Or is there really a ghost moose wandering the woods and streams and lakes of Maine? I guess you'd have to see it for yourself to truly decide.
And I guess I'd take our ghost cat any day.
Yeah, I think so. It just lays at your feet and, kind of cuddles its way in.
No pointy antlers to stick you with.
None whatsoever.
Hey, did you know? Synonyms are 2 words that mean the same thing. Antonyms are 2 words that mean the opposite. Contronyms are 1 word that mean the opposite of themselves. Confused yet? Here are some examples. To dust. To dust your furniture means to remove dust from your furniture, but to dust your cake with sugar means to cover it with dust. To rent. If you have a property to rent, you lend it to earn money. If you rent a property, you spend money to live in it. To seed. If you seed your grass, you add seeds. But if you seed a tomato, you take the seeds out. To screen. If you're embarrassed, you may hide your face with your hands to screen it. But at a movie theater, we screen movies to see them. And finally, to overlook. A boss may walk through the office to overlook production, but that same boss might overlook a mistake. Who'da thunk it?
Well, that was pretty interesting.
I'd never heard of contronyms before. Like, I knew they must have existed because those words exist, but I didn't know they had a name.
Yeah, I've never heard of it either. Well, with that said, where did your mind wander this week?
Well, I guess we're kind of on a magical mystery animal tour this week because I found my own strange It Could Be a Cryptid story.
Oh, cool. Can't wait to hear it.
All is still and serene as you sit in your canoe, floating within the Grand Glaze portion of the White River in Newport, Arkansas. It's been a relaxing day, but as the afternoon too quickly approaches the park's closing time, you realize you should probably paddle back towards your parked truck and call it a day, even though you don't really want to. For as far as you can see, you are the only human on the water. As you scan the river's banks, you don't see anyone hiking either. It must be much closer to closing time than you thought. Paddling a little faster, you keep your eye on the large, floating tree that seems to be blocking your path. It wasn't there just a few moments ago, but getting safely around it is more important than wondering how it suddenly appeared. Suddenly, the tree seemingly glides away from you before curving back on itself and inexplicably heading straight for you. As the top of the tree arches out of the water, you realize in a split second that this is no tree, it's some sort of living creature, and it's huge. Before you can even decide what to do or what you're seeing, the creature lets out some sort of bellow underwater, making every hair on your body stand up.
Perhaps it just passed gas. But I guess there'd be air bubbles coming up too, big bubbles.
Unbeknownst to you, you had accidentally rowed into the White River Monster Sanctuary and Refuge, a government-protected area next to the Jacksonville State Park, and you just encountered the White River Monster.
A river monster. That's a bit different. You know, I've heard of plenty of lake monsters and sea monsters, but never a river monster. In fact, Beth and I live next to Lake Champlain, home of the Lake Champlain lake monster named Champy.
And I think I saw it once, but that's a story for another time. And it was probably just a sturgeon, and it's not really a great story. But anyway, the Quapaw Indians in Arkansas had passed down tales of their own canoes being overturned by a river beast way before the rumor began that a river monster also overturned a Confederate gunboat during the Civil War, which was way before accounts made it into newspapers and became the talk of the town. But in December of 1912, the stories of Whitey, as the monster is sometimes known, began to catch media attention. An Arkansas newspaper reported that timber workers floating rafts of cedar on the White River noticed something very large in the water. At first, they thought it was a boulder, but upon closer inspection, they thought it could only be a turtle, a 300-pound one, though. Hearing about the encounter, a local angler named Tom Brainerd organized a search party, bringing several ropes to catch the animal, but they were unsuccessful. In 1924, a woman on the river near Little Rock claimed she saw a huge monster in the river that had a crusty and dingy gray hide. Most accounts describe the monster this way, some even comparing its hide to that of an elephant. Its size has been documented as both about 30 feet long and the length of 3 cars with the width of 1 car. It weighs anywhere from 600 to 1,500 pounds. And in most accounts, it resembles a snake, not a turtle, but a snake with a spiny backbone and the ability to bellow or snort underwater. Or pass gas, if you're my husband. In 1937, sightings reached a fever pitch, beginning with Dee and Sylvia Wyatt, a sharecropper couple who lived on the river. During that summer, they spotted what they thought was a thrashing, drowning horse. But when they continued to see the same horse for several days, they decided to tell their landlord, Bramblett Bateman, about it. Bateman saw the creature for himself, and he determined right away that it was no horse. He described it as, quote, as big as a boxcar and slick as a slimy elephant without any legs. He wasn't the only one. A dozen other witnesses, including a Jackson County deputy sheriff, also came forward to say that they had seen the same thing. The News Palladium newspaper out of Michigan reported in July of that year that, quote, the monster which on rare intervals rises to the surface, floats silently for a few moments, and then submerges to make its presence known only by occasional strings of bubbles.
See, I told you so. Sea monsters have to fart, too. Or river monsters.
Right. Suddenly, hundreds of townsfolk made their way down to the river to catch sight of the beast for themselves. Many of them brought their guns. According to one account, a man even brought a Thompson submachine gun. The State Game and Fish Commission stepped in, saying that not only guns, but explosives should not be part of any investigation. Instead, the local Chamber of Commerce erected a fence around the area and began charging curious spectators 25 cents.
That's just wrong.
Wait till later. Time magazine even got wind of the story, running a 500-word article in 1937. In fact, in many news outlets, the White River Monster stories overshadowed the news of Amelia Earhart's disappearance. The Newport Chamber of Commerce was pretty serious about proving the existence of Whitey, the White River Monster, especially since professional photographers from the various newspapers had been unable to snap a photo of it. Because, maybe he was shy.
Or maybe he just didn't like the name Whitey. I think it's quite offensive.
I know. That's why I only referred to him that way once because it made me uncomfortable, so I did not refer to it that way anymore.
Can you imagine all these people in the bank, saying,
careful.
Hey, there's Whitey.
Careful. Oh, honey. Local state toll bridge collector W.E. Penix came up with the idea of constructing a gigantic net. His thought was that instead of capturing the monster, the net would temporarily hold it so experts could determine once and for all what the monster really was. He rounded up all the rope he could find, planning to construct a net that was 40 feet long and 15 feet wide, with a mesh of 6 to 8 inches. A group of local motorboat owners would help trawl the river with the net to see what they could snag. But, unfortunately, the plan never came to fruition because Penix ran out of funds and enough rope to complete the net. As a last-ditch effort, the Chamber of Commerce brought in a professional diver from Memphis named Charles Brown.
Charlie Brown?
Yes, Charles Brown.
Wow.
And sent him into the murky water, where the visibility was only about 3 inches. He was armed with an 8-foot harpoon, though.
Well, they should have brought in Snoopy, too, because he could have sniffed him out.
Dangled him above the water to see if the monster would take a snap at him.
Perhaps.
The Los Angeles Times ran a photo of Brown with the headline, All Dressed Up to Capture Monster, on July 24, 1937. In the photo, Brown is grinning, holding on to that 8-foot harpoon, as an assistant is about to put his diver's helmet over his head. Brown made 3 attempts over the course of 2 days. It was quite the celebration. A dance floor was erected on the riverbank, and food vendors sold their barbecued goat sandwiches. Pilots even sold flights over the river for those who wanted to pay for a better view. It's estimated that somewhere between 300 and 500 people came to the event. Even the stores in town closed at noon so that everyone was able to attend. At one point, excitement ran pretty high as several people even caught sight of the monster. Except it turned out to be nothing more than a dead hog floating down the river.
Oh, that's rather disappointing.
Brown's caption ends with, quote, Last reports were to the effect that he had failed to find any monster on the river's bottom, end quote. All in all, the Chamber of Commerce made $9 million from the hoopla.
$9 million?
$9 million. Not in today's money. in 1938 money.
That's sickening.
Just saying, $9 million. And the hoopla died down, of course. For nearly 40 years, no one caught sight of the White River Monster. Maybe all of that dancing and cooking scared him off. Just a few years later, in 1940, two local brothers claimed they'd solved the identity of the beast when they caught a 220-pound fish measuring 9 feet long and 11 inches between the eyes. The fish was put on display in front of Bob's Meat Market in town. Not to be outdone, another man came forward that same year, claiming the whole story was just that, a story devised by a local shell digger meant to scare off competitors. But just like that, the White River Monster craze, as well as the monster itself, disappeared.
Makes you wonder.
But then, in 1971, it seemed as though the White River Monster had returned. Several people began talking about some gigantic creature in the river with gray, peeling skin and a spiky spine. Some even reported seeing a horn protruding from its head. Two men, Ollie Richardson and Joey Dupree, even found tracks in the mud on the riverbank, the first ever reported. They were 3-toed and 14 inches long. Spooked, the two men jumped in their boat and sped off, hitting something unseen in the water so hard that it elevated the boat. Further sightings came in, including the first known photograph taken by Cloyce Warren, who was employed by the White River Lumber Company. The photograph is blurry and considered inconclusive. Now, I did find 2 photographs online, but I couldn't confirm that either one of them was Warren's photograph. One of them is from the ground level, looking through some trees into the water. And to me, whatever is in the water looks like an alligator's head. So, of course, I looked it up, and alligators do live in Arkansas, but not in that particular part of the state. The other photo is from the air, and if it's a drone shot, it obviously is much more recent than 1971, but it's also blurry, and it shows a dark smudge in the river. And the photo is labeled with arrows that say unknown object and wake. But, I could be wrong, but my spidey sense told me that it wasn't a real photo. So I apologize if it really is to whoever took it, but I couldn't find anything to confirm that either one of the photos was Warren's or that either photo that I was looking at was even authentic. But anyway, back to 1971. At this point, a biologist named Roy Mackle weighed in, going to great lengths to prove once and for all that the White River Monster was simply an elephant seal that had gotten lost and found its way into the river from the Gulf of Mexico. However, this has not been known to happen before, and I'm not sure how one seal could have survived in that river for over 50 years unless it brought its mate with it.
Perhaps several mates.
Yeah. Another possibility is that it was a Florida manatee. Manatees are able to live in both salt and fresh water and have been known to swim up the Mississippi, which it would have had to have done in order to make it into the White River. One confirmed case from 2006 is a manatee that swam 720 miles up the Mississippi. And manatees also have an average lifespan in the wild of 50 to 60 years. So is that all that the beast was? It was just a manatee? Were people misidentifying a known animal because they'd never seen one before? As recently as 1971?
Well, it could happen.
Well, either way, if the White River Monster was simply a manatee or an unknown cryptid, which is what it was, people, it is legally protected in the White River Monster Sanctuary and Refuge Area and has been since 1973. Then Senator Robert Harvey said that it was, quote, in the best interest of the state of Arkansas to protect the welfare of the now internationally famous White River Monster from harm or extinction because of the great tourist attraction, end quote.
Well, that's nice. Whitey's protected.
Oh, Jesus. We're going to have to cut that out. You can't say that.
I can.
No, that's not okay.
Oh.
The legislature...
Why
I can't
not?
believe you said that.
Why? Because Whitey is protected. Isn't he? There's nothing wrong with that.
The legislation established a 48-mile reserve from the southern point on the river known as the Old Grand Glaze to as far north as the point known as Rosie. This makes it, quote, unlawful to molest, kill, trample, or harm the White River monster while in its native retreat, end quote.
Well, I'm glad they're not going to molest this monster. Unless...
I don't think they define molest the way that you're taking it. It means to bother it in a negative way.
Right. And as long as he gives consent, it wouldn't be molestation.
God. You're on a roll tonight.
Well, all I've got to say about it is that whatever these things that are lurking in the water or the forest, they should be protected.
Yes, and to be fair, there have been no reported recent sightings.
So nobody's seen Whitey at all.
Stop! No one has seen the White River monster since the 1970s.
Well then, there you have it. I guess that about wraps it up for this episode.
I guess so. So, we'll see all you wanderers next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon.
Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
Thank you all for your continued support.
See you all next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.